Have you been enjoying our Impact Podcast and our great guests? Then please give us a thumbs up and leave a 5-star review on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you consume your favorite podcasts. This edition of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by ERI. ERI has a mission to protect people, the planet, and your privacy, and is the largest fully integrated IT and electronics asset disposition provider and cybersecurity-focused hardware destruction company in the United States, and maybe even the world. For more information on how ERI can help your business properly dispose of outdated electronic hardware devices, please visit eridirect.com. This episode of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by Closed Loop Partners. Closed Loop Partners is a leading circular economy investor in the United States with an extensive network of Fortune 500 corporate investors, family offices, institutional investors, industry experts, and impact partners. Closed Loop's platform spans the arc of capital from venture capital to private equity, bridging gaps and fostering synergies to scale the circular economy. To find Closed Loop Partners, please go to www.closedlooppartners.com. Welcome to another edition of the Impact Podcast. I'm John Shigerian, and I'm so honored to have with us today Worku Gachou. He's the head of North American Inclusivity, Impact, and Sustainability at Visa. Welcome, Worku, to the Impact Podcast.
John, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, yeah, and thank you for joining us today and spending the time and sharing your thoughts. And before we get talking about all the important work that you and your colleagues are doing in inclusivity, impact, and sustainability at Visa, can you first share a little bit about your origin story? Where did you grow up, how you even got on this journey, and who inspired you to do the important and great work that you and your colleagues are doing now at Visa?
Happy to, John. Happy to, John. I have a very nonlinear path to where I ended up today. And so I guess it all starts off in Alexandria, Virginia, outside Washington, D.C. Okay. That's where I was born and raised. My folks are still there. My parents immigrated from Ethiopia about 40 years ago. And, they're the epitome of the American success story, came with nothing and worked hard and was able to provide for their family and, ended up where I am today. I've always been fascinated by the intersection of politics and business, living outside the nation's capital. And so, I've always kind of found my career journey as, how can you leverage the private sector to drive development and impact? And so, I spent about a decade on Capitol Hill, where I worked for a member of Congress and worked for the Committee on Foreign Affairs, where we tried to create laws and pass legislation that incentivized the businesses in the private sector to engage in impact. And when they did, they got certain tax benefits. And with that, right, we saw an ability to utilize the scale and innovation of the private sector, not relying solely on government resources to meet the impact and the development goals that we had in Africa and the Middle East and Latin America. And so from my time after Capitol Hill, I then went to a law firm where I learned how, we can really leverage this idea of, corporate impact to help advance broader business objectives. And so at the firm, I had the opportunity to work with some of, the world's most innovative and large companies to figure out, what is their need, what is their impact story, right? And how do we apply that to some of their business goals and objectives in tough markets? I then left the law firm and I joined an organization called the Development Finance Corporation, which many people don't know about it, but it is essentially like the U.S. government's private equity firm. It's a brilliant structure. They have about $60 billion of capital, and they invest that capital in private sector enterprises. Again, going back to this theme of private sector-led development, right? investing in these private sector entities, right, will spur job creation, will spur innovation, and will spur development around the world. And so I led origination in sub-Saharan Africa, where we had about $6 billion of capital in the market, and we provided equity, debt, and we were a limited partner to a number of general partners that are active in the continent. And so that was me being exposed to seeing how we evaluate, companies operating in this market, right? And how can we find synergies between their mission, right, and the impact that we were trying to achieve. And so, after my service at the Development Finance Corporation, I've always been kind of in the periphery of private sector led impact, right, but never in-house anywhere. And so when the visa opportunity came about, it was the perfect chance to marry up kind of all my different skill sets into one role at one of the world's most recognizable brands, and that's doing that is at the cutting edge innovation of money movement.
And how long have you been at Visa?
I've been at Visa for 2.5 years. It feels like much longer though, but 2.5.
And you're a very humble guy as well, Worku. You're also adjunct professor at Georgetown University. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, I've always been, I myself, I studied international affairs and political science in school. And you're always told that there's certain paths, right, when you take certain degrees, and the assumption that you have to go into academia or research, and so for me, right, and kind of my unique path, I really wanted to kind of take that opportunity to show my students and other students that there are unique ways in which you can apply what you're learning, with the foreign policy of political science and international relations degree, right, within the private sector. And so I teach a course on African environmental policy and looking at, how do you leverage the private sector to achieve some of the environmental goals that the continent and the countries on the continent have. And so, for me, this is my third year doing it, and let's say I've never appreciated teachers and professors as much as stepping into those shoes. I mean, the prep and the work that goes into it. Georgetown students are top caliber. They ask some hard hitting questions, and so it's been a fun experience. I myself am learning a lot and really enjoy it.
And as you just say, it's great that you just mentioned that. An appreciation for our teachers and our professors around the world. I mean, the responsibility that they shoulder as well, to try to educate our next generation is not to be taken lightly.
No, I say continuously that I think it's one of the most underpaid professions in the U.S. They are at the forefront of the next generation, and how do you prepare them? How do you ensure that they are ready for the challenges and the opportunities that they'll face once they leave their respective institutions? And so I'm serious. I called up a few professors as I got this appointment and was kind of like, oh crap, like what have I got myself into? Advices, pointers, right? So it's been fun. I sometimes feel like I'm the student myself.
I think we all, if we really want to continue to evolve as good people, I think it's a great place to stay in life as just a student. Really just a great way it's just a great mindset to continue to have and hold at all times.
Of course.
Let's go now. Let's switch topics a little bit over to what you're doing at Visa. Now, you joined about 2.5 years ago. I love always to talk about the entry point. When you came on to head of North America in terms of titles, inclusivity, impact, and sustainability, what was pre-existing and what was a blank sheet of paper for you to create and vision out and to execute upon? How much was historical? How much was literally going to be all you just laying out a new path forward?
I I came into a blank slate. I came into a
Wow.
blank slate.
Wow.
My role did not exist previously. We didn't have a team. We didn't have a structure. We didn't have a budget. We had various folks doing various aspects of the work.
Right.
But what our leaders had the foresight in doing was recognizing, establishing my role within our corporate entity, right? Within Visa Inc., we have a separate foundation that does a lot of our philanthropic work.
Okay.
But within the Inc. side, it was a recognition that we can really live out our purpose mission, right? By leveraging the products, the services, the technologies that we have. And so, I tell folks and not to, begrudge my 26,000 colleagues around the world, but I think I have one of the coolest jobs at Visa, right? Where I sit, I get to think about, right? There are these teams that are creating innovative technology at the center of money movement, right? This is what makes economies work, what makes business function. And we get to think, how can we leverage this technology or this product to achieve our social impact and our environmental impact objectives?
And so, it's, what I've learned, if I've learned anything, Worku, over the last 16 or so years hosting this show, is that inclusivity, impact, sustainability, even now some of these other alphabet terms, ESG, CSR, the shift from the linear to circular economy, can mean different things at different organizations. Explain, when you're doing the walking the high wire and trying to balance all the interests in terms of where you spend your time and energy, and have Visa spend their time, energy, and resources in terms of the importance of inclusivity, the importance of sustainability, and how to maximize the impact that you and your wonderful colleagues are making. How do you do that? How do you weigh all those very heavy and important topics now that, again, are really going to determine the future of our planet in many ways? How do you do that at Visa? And how did you start that balancing act? And how has that evolved for you?
That's a great question, John. It's something that we thought about very carefully. And the short answer, before I get into the long answer, is ensuring that everything that we're doing is aligned with Visa's broader business objectives, right? We've seen, throughout my experience in the CSR, corporate responsibility, corporate impact world, right? The function go awry when teams try to embark on areas or issue sets that are outside core to the business.
Okay.
And so when we develop our strategy and try to allocate resources and team members to that strategy, we looked at our core business, right? What is its functions? And can we look at the periphery of that and identify opportunities where we could add value, right, to drive the social impact and environmental impacts that we're trying to achieve, right? And so, to your point about this kind of alphabet soup of different initiatives, right? We have three main pillars. First is social equity, really looking at the economic mobility of underserved populations. Then we have a pillar on financial inclusion and financial education, right? Really ensuring that people have the skills and the training they need, right, to ensure that they're harnessing the digital economy. Okay. And lastly, and also just as importantly, is small businesses. I think you can appreciate the role that small businesses play for the economy in North America, in the US in particular, right? And so what are the tools, resources, asset, funding that small businesses need to be successful when we think about job creation, when we think about economic development?
So under those three pillars, that sounds like that adds up to your driving efforts to create equitable economic growth in the United States using those three main, pillars to bolster you. So how do you then manage the success and impact of in those three areas that you just outlined: social equity, financial inclusion, and small business success?
So we have developed specific programming under each of those pillars, right, to advance the goals that we outlined.
Okay.
So let me give you an example.
Sure.
One initiative under our social equity pillar is a program we have called MDI Accelerate. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term MDIs, but it's a designation that's given by the FDIC and the Federal Reserve. It stands for Minority Depository Institutions.
Understood.
And you get this designation if you're majority minority owned bank institution, or if you serve a minority community predominantly. And for us, right, when I walked through these three pillars, our team took a step back. And as we were thinking strategically, we were like, where can we leverage our resources, our partnerships, right, to advance goals within these pillars? And so we identified the MDI segment as one of those areas. Many people don't know, but MDIs play an integral role in providing capital and credit to communities that historically lack that access. And so think of small business loans, think of consumer loans, mortgages, affordable housing, right? They are the bedrock to it. And frankly, they've been overlooked over the years and have struggled because of that. We thought we're in a unique place to inject resources, both monetary, both product and solutions, all three, to support them and their growth so that they can acquire new customers and retain the existing customers they have. And so through this program, we've deposited 100 million Visa Inc. dollars in a number of these, in dozens of these institutions around the US. And what's exciting is for every dollar that we place in these institutions, it catalyzes $10 of additional lending. And so we're scaling our impact, right, and getting into the communities on the front lines through MDIs, right?
I love it. And so basically, it's a 10-to-1 ratio on the impact. So you're talking about $100 million in Visa dollars that then lead to $1 billion in impact.
That's the goal over the course of the program. That is what we anticipate. And this isn't our estimates, right? This is estimates from scholars and others who've looked at the catalyzing impact of placing deposits in these institutions actually creates.
I love it. I've read about your digital empowerment program. Can you explain what that is and what's the impact and success of that program? How has that evolved?
Yeah. So our digital impact work falls both under our SMB pillar, but then also our financial inclusion pillar as well. Recognizing that there's this idea now that financial inclusion has historically meant have you been unbanked or underbanked? Have you been excluded from the formal kind of financial ecosystem? We have a different perception. We think now you are included or excluded from the digital economy, right? It's a different approach to understanding what do you need to successfully use your phone as your bank, right? Or your computer. And so we saw the importance of addressing digital inequity. And we think of digital inequity as three pillars. First, right, is do you have the ecosystem? Do you have the access to actually benefit from the digital economy? If you have that access in place, the second piece is, do you have the products and the hardware to leverage that access? And the third piece is, do you have the knowledge and the training to benefit from that access and the products? And so looking at the spectrum of digital equity, we recognize, that first bucket, the ecosystem access piece, we don't really have a place to play there, right? There's a lot of internet service providers or cable providers, others who are doing great work in this space to ensure, low cost, affordable access. But where we can play is within the hardware and with the training piece. And so working cross-functionally, right? Again, where I sit, I get to work across our different functions. We partnered with our IT team. Visa is a tech company, at heart. We have a lot of tech assets, a lot of computers, a lot of hardware that we go through. So I said, could we take a small segment of our end-of-life assets, refurbish them, work with nonprofit partners in the community to distribute them, and alongside that distribution, provide training? And so over this past year, fiscal year, we've trained over 5,000 individuals and small businesses on how to leverage the digital economy. But because we're reusing end-of-life assets, we've also diverted 30,000 pounds of digital waste away from landfills. So it's a win-win both on the social impact side and the environmental impact side.
I love it. Talk a little bit about your latest digital empowerment event that was in the Navajo Nation. What was that event? What were you trying to achieve there, and how did it break out and evolve?
Yeah, that was an exciting one. So Visa has a robust ERG group, employee resource group, and we have our native ERG, which is an ERG and affinity group for Native Americans within Visa. And so, we do these programs around the US and in Canada. We do them in urban and rural locations. And to credit our ERG leadership at Native, they said, hey, this is a super cool program, but you haven't done it on a reservation yet. Would you like to? And we said, that's a great idea. And so working in close collaboration with our Native ERG, we worked with a number of organizations, primarily Choice Humanitarian, and entrepreneurs who live in the former Bennett Freeze area of the Navajo Nation to identify small business owners and entrepreneurs and provide them with the digital tools that they needed to be successful. I think the landscape of the tribal lands are quite harsh and quite vast, and so being connected to the digital economy and the digital ecosystem is key for them in terms of productivity and time saving. And so credit to our Native ERG, but it was their idea.
Got it. For those listeners and viewers who've just joined us, we've got Worku Gachou today with us. He's the head of North America Inclusivity, Impact, and Sustainability at Visa. To find Worku and his colleagues and all the important work they're doing in inclusivity and impact and sustainability, please go to www.usa.visa.com. It's early days yet still in your tenure, Worku, but do you start keeping a formal track of your programs, the successes they're having, the vision that you have for the future, and do you wrap it up every year in an impact report that then lives online or is distributed to your constituents and board members and other people and employees and other people that are excited to read that kind of stuff?
I feel like you've been spying on me. The end of our fiscal year is September 31st. And so a lot of what myself and our broader team's been doing this past week is really aggregating and accumulating our impact that we've done over this past fiscal year. And we produce an annual corporate impact and ESG report where a lot of our work and a lot of our impact is documented and published for the public, right? And, part of our metrics and our evaluation is not to, boast about the work that we're doing, but it is to assess for us personally kind of what works and what doesn't work. One of the things that I've seen in my career in the corporate impact space is, folks being reluctant to stop programs that aren't working, right? You have these nonprofit relationships, you have this work you're doing, but sometimes you're not achieving the intended impact that you sought out to from the start. And so being comfortable with shutting something down or slowly walking it back and being able to pivot is, I think, an area where a lot of impact professionals, right, are hoping to spend more time, and we're doing that self-reflection as well.
Wonderful. And that gets published when then?
That gets published, I believe, at the end of the year.
And then that lives on usa.visa.com website?
Yes, sir. Yes, it does.
Wonderful. We were talking a little bit a while ago about the Navajo Nation digital empowerment event and success there. Are you planning to expand digital empowerment programs in more cities and communities around the United States and North America specifically?
Yeah. Like we take a pretty strategic approach, right? In terms of like where we identify markets and communities, right? Looking at where the needs are, right? We have a number of resources and data abilities where, we see, that there is ecosystem here, that there is access, but people aren't utilizing it. So is it because they don't have the equipment or they don't have the training? If they have the equipment, then we know it's a training problem. And so, through some deductive reasoning, we try to really hone in on the areas where, our impacts can drive the intended outcomes that we're striving for at scale, right? Visa is ubiquitous and we try to be, present in a lot of markets. And so the one thing that I always have to take a step back and think about is scale, right? And how do we operate at the scale that we are known for and expected for.
That's interesting. Your specialty is inclusivity of stakeholders, government, good government, NGOs, and good business, responsible business leadership. Talk a little bit about your own thoughts on the critical nature of these kind of partnerships working together to further DEI and CSR work, and why really, when you get all the stakeholders involved, you could do more with less, you could go farther with less, and you can make bigger impacts in a shorter period of time. What's some of your thoughts on how you aggregate and enable the stakeholders to be less polarized and be more collaborative?
I mean, it's a great question, John, and it's something that I saw from my time in government, right? I was on the other side of the table, and recognizing that government resources, even though people think they're plentiful, they're actually, there's a dearth of it focused on the development and impact, right, that I think everyone anticipates or expects for their community. And so recognizing this, right, we try to bring in a lot of stakeholders, private sector, nonprofits, and others who are doing this important work in government. Now, where I sit at Visa, right, I think about, okay, what are the resources that we have, right? Earned wage access. So people that are in the gig economy can get paid for for the work they've done that day, right? Or other solutions around, Visa Direct, right? Where we can help people with account to account transfers, right? This new approach to the economy and how money moves. And so, we like to position ourselves in a way where we will bring our unique tools, our unique offerings, right? And sit with partners, nonprofits and governments to help advance a collective goal. So let me give you another kind of concrete example, and instead of speaking theoretically, right? We partner with FEMA closely on disaster response. FEMA is the U.S. government's disaster response agency, and when a disaster strikes, there is a real need to understand which places are operational so that FEMA and other first responders can know which stores to acquire goods, gasoline, and other products for in their response. Visa has the ability to see which merchants are online and or offline based off of whether they're processing transactions or not. And so we developed a model and a map where after disaster strikes, we call the back to business locator, we'll activate the tool and we can see which businesses are operational, and we provide that data set to FEMA to help a orderly and expedient response to that disaster.
Wow, I love it. You're still relatively young first of all, relatively young as a human being, but also new in your tenure at Visa. What do you use on this? This is a two-part question for your Worku. A, what inspires you today to continue to do the great work you're doing with your colleagues? And B, what do you use as benchmarks? Do you clearly look at the obvious benchmarks of competitive brands in the credit and debit space, or do you look outside of that at a wider breadth of benchmarks for different types of organizations and corporations around the world and what they're doing in inclusivity, impact, and sustainability to further inform you and inspire you at the same time?
Yeah. There are a lot of folks that I look at that inspire me and guide me. I think, for me, what inspires me is my time early on in my career, right? When I was on Capitol Hill and focused on, African development issues. And I saw the power of, telling someone that, hey, I don't want to give you a handout, but I want to invest in you because I see, because I see, what opportunity lies ahead for you and your skills. And so for me, I think back to how, placing that confidence in that entrepreneur, right? Or that small business owner in Kenya, right? How they took that vote of confidence and support not only their family, but the broader community, right? And so it is always remembering that there is a beneficiary at the end of the strategy documents,
right?
And the discussions with your finance team and securing resources, right? Not forgetting sight of that beneficiary that you're trying to impact and improve the livelihood of themselves and their family.
There's a real tangibility to your impacts.
Absolutely. In terms of looking at others and benchmarking, I personally try to look outside of the payments and financial services world, right? There sometimes can be this bubble effect, echo chamber, right? Where everyone's talking about the same issues, everyone's trying to bring forth the same resources. And what I've found is if you take a more holistic approach to your benchmarking and to your learning, right? This space is still being defined, right? There's still a lot of literature. There's still a lot of scholarly journals that will be written about this past few years of corporate impact, right? I try to think holistically about what folks are doing in different sectors and how they're looking at their impact. For example, Patagonia and the work they've done around sustainability and the environment. Bar none, some of the impressive stuff we've seen. The idea to invest in MDIs, right, actually came from Netflix. They were one of the early pioneers, the CEO of Netflix, who said, "Hey, this is a segment I think is important. We have some capital, and let's deposit that capital in MDIs, right?" And so I try to think holistically of with sectors outside of our traditional kind of vertical of payments and financial services.
Understood. With regards to what's next at Visa, what gets you out of bed? What makes you jump out of bed in the morning that you're allowed to talk about in terms of forthcoming projects and initiatives that really get you jazzed? That you're allowed to talk about.
Yes. I'd love to have a job tomorrow, John. So I don't want to get ahead of my skis here. We have a lot of interesting stuff cooking. For example, right? We talked about looking at minority depository institutions as an important segment. We've placed assets in these institutions, right? We also want these assets to be working, right? We want these small community banks and credit unions to be underwriting loans and credit, leveraging this capital, but they're using a lot of antiquated systems. And so is there a role for us to help them advance digitally, right, in underwriting so that more capital can be deployed in the communities? Looking within our digital empowerment work, right, we focus squarely on the digital economy piece, right? That's what Visa does. That's Visa's bread and butter. But there are a number of other industries that are leveraging the digital ecosystem. Think of workforce development. Think of telehealth. think of telemedicine, right? And so, we're beginning to think about, are there other partners that we should be collaborating with, other private sector entities that we should be collaborating with to loop in, to bring into the fold, into our broader efforts to address digital inequity across the U.S. And so, we have this network of networks model, right? We have a lot of interesting partners and clients. And so for us, it's great because we get to look across the board and see who's doing what and who's doing something interesting and how do we get them looped in and bought in.
I want to go back to your other hat that you wear, your adjunct professor hat.
Yeah.
And we're going to use Washington, D.C. as an example.
It's not a good example these days, but we can let that slide.
No, but what I want to do is use something else in Washington as an example, since you're a product of that whole general area. As you know, at one point when you were a young boy, your mom or dad or both of them brought you to see the Jefferson Memorial, the Lincoln Memorial, the White House, the Capitol building. But now, as an adult with many experiences behind you, they're the same iconic monuments, but you're a different man. The first day you walked into class, as opposed to when you walk into class now, 3 years later, you wanted your students to come away with a message or a theme or take away something that you felt was inherently important to the future of this planet, that you wanted them to walk out of that class with, even though they all approach the materials differently. You're a different man than you were 3 years ago, just like we all should be if we're going to evolve as humans. But you're teaching still a class of students. What now, today, do you want your students to come away with? And how different is it from your original approach to when you were teaching the first time teaching of your students, the first year that you were an adjunct professor at Georgetown?
That's a great question. I think, me personally, I think it's giving students the encouragement, the space to challenge the status quo. I think when you look at the most successful entrepreneurs, the most successful innovators, business leaders, it's always been their ability to see something and say, hey, just because we've been doing it this way this long doesn't mean that it's the best way or the best approach.
Right.
And so I get extremely happy, proud when there are students that are out there challenging a policy, challenging a decision matrix for a foreign policy case, right? And they're saying, hey, why don't we try this way? Or why don't we try that way? And I think bringing that outside of the classroom, right, into the professional world as they graduate and grow in their own careers, I think will pay dividends, right? I think there is this comfort in being like, okay, like we've done it this way, let's keep it and let's not rock the boat. But in looking at what challenges we have ahead, both from society, from the environment, I mean, you name it, we can't go the same approach. And so you need people who are challenging, who are challenging the status quo, who are out there thinking of new solutions, right, for existing problems.
Man, I wish I had you as a professor when I was in college, because that would have been wonderful to walk out of one of my classes learning that lesson. I think that's a beautiful and elegant and important lesson for all of our next generation to learn. And thank gosh you're in that role as an adjunct professor at Georgetown University. You know what, Worku, as you and I know, sustainability, impact work, inclusivity, there's no finish line. It's a journey. And I just want you to know that you're always welcome back on the Impact Podcast to share the continued journey that you and your colleagues are on at Visa. It's an important journey. As you say, Visa is a ubiquitous brand around the world. So you have a tremendous and important platform that you and your colleagues get to work on. For our listeners and viewers, to find Worku and his colleagues and the important work they're doing in inclusivity, impact, and sustainability, please go to www.visa.org. workusa.visa.com. Worku, thank you for your time today. Thank you for your vision. Thank you for your thoughts. And more importantly, thank you and your colleagues for making the world a better place.
John, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
This edition of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by Engage. Engage is a digital booking platform revolutionizing the talent booking industry. With thousands of athletes, celebrities, entrepreneurs, and business leaders, Engage is the go-to spot for booking talent, for speeches, custom experiences, live streams, and much more. For more information on Engage or to book talent today, visit letsengage.com. This edition of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by ERI. ERI has a mission to protect people, the planet, and your privacy, and is the largest fully integrated IT and electronics asset disposition provider and cybersecurity-focused hardware destruction company in the United States, and maybe even the world. For more information on how ERI can help your business properly dispose of outdated electronic hardware devices, please visit eridirect.com.